May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each heart be holy and acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. There's this painting by the artist Caravaggio titled The Calling of St. Matthew. Sometimes Caravaggio's Baroque-era paintings seem like the precursor to those classic film noir movies of the late 40s and early 50s. This like dramatic use of shadow and light, the stark and startled expressions on the faces of his subjects, the underlying tension in many of his works, it's all there. It's like the Maltese Falcon circa 1599. And the calling of St. Matthew is really no different. Jesus' hand in the painting emerging from the shadow of the room, reaching toward a table of surprised faces. Most assume Matthew in the painting is the bearded man with the classic saintly-looking face pointing toward himself like, me? But I think it's someone else in the painting that's Matthew. There's a young man at the table, and he's slumped over a pile of coins, disheveled hair hanging down in his face. His eyes look tired, hung over, maybe even sad. And he's not paying any attention to Jesus at all. His mind is somewhere else. He's lost in his own thoughts. And the bearded man, who some think is pointing to himself, saying, me? I like to think he's pointing to this lost, disheveled, greedy soul, saying, him? Him? Really? You're calling him? Which captures the dynamic in the calling of St. Matthew. This underlying element of why in the world, Jesus, why in the world would you call him? The tax collector? Really? Don't you know who he is and what he does? But Jesus didn't just call him. He did something else. Jesus changed his name, or at least that's how the tradition understands it. He changed his name. This was Levi the tax collector, and you can imagine the nicknames and the slurs: Levi the crook, Levi the swindler, Levi the traitor, the thief, the wolf, the taker. See, Levi's job was to set up a booth on the shores of Galilee and tax the sandals right off the fishermen's feet. And what kind of man would do that to his own people? Hard-working men and women, trying to put food on the table, trying to raise and care for their children. Oh, you can hear the comments, right? Levi, what happened to you? We grew up together, man. We played together. Our families broke bread together. Don't you remember? You and I sat together as kids in synagogue, and we'd made fun of the rabbi when his back was turned toward us. What happened to you, Levi? How could you do this? Because it took a different level of greed and malice to be that person, to take from your own like that. Which is why it was so absurd, so unreasonable, so risky to not only call Levi the tax collector, but to change his name to Matthew. Do y'all know what Matthew means? Get this. Matthew means gift of God. Gift of God. It's like Jesus was saying, your life thus far has been this endless hunger for more. More money, more wine, more women, more, never satisfying, never fulfilling craving to take. But now you're going to follow me, Matthew, and learn to give. And not only that, your life is going to be like a gift of God. Have you ever met someone called like that? Have you ever met an unlikely person called into something? I once made a hospital visit to a man. I didn't know him. He requested a priest, so I went. a shock of unkempt white hair, a 5-day-old beard, heavy bags under his eyes. His flesh is as thin as the skin of a grape, just clung to these skinny bones. He was dying of cancer. I sat down and he said, I was a drunk, throwaway, selfish. I hurt a lot of people. I hurt a lot of people I loved. My daughter still won't even speak to me. But God called me. He told me to learn carpentry and to carve altarpieces. So I did. And then this man pulled out a little photo album, and page after page after page of these beautifully hand-carved wooden altarpieces, and now they're hung in little churches all over the United States. I'm calling you, Jesus said. And you're no longer a tax collector. You, Matthew, are a gift of God. And right off the bat, right away, Jesus puts him in a position to give, to be the gift. Let's go to your house, Matthew. Throw us a party. Crack open the good wine. Give us a good dinner. Give us a good time. And Jesus goes. He follows the tax collector, follows him right into his neighborhood, down his street, into his house. You know, we talk a lot about following Jesus in the church. We do. About following Jesus, obviously. That's a good thing, right? But maybe what we don't talk about enough is how Jesus followed others. He followed them wherever the road led. I mean, just look here. Jesus follows Matthew to his home, the home of a tax collector, causing a bit of controversy along the way. The Pharisees whispering to Jesus' disciples, hey, why does your teacher eat with these sinners? Doesn't he know who they are and what they do for a living or don't do for a living? Why does he eat with these people? And right in the middle of Jesus teaching them about the mercy of God, there's a rap at the door, and the leader of the synagogue bursts in begging Jesus to raise his little girl from the dead. And what does Jesus do? He follows. Jesus follows this leader of the synagogue, someone else, through different streets, into a different neighborhood, into a different home. Jesus follows. And it's only because he's doing all this following that some woman desperate for healing takes the chance, has the guts. She has the guts to grab the hem of his robe because Jesus followed people. I don't know if y'all know who Jaber Crow is. I love Jaber Crow. He's the town barber in Wendell-Berry's fictional Kentucky township of Port William. And Jaber, he's got a keen eye not just for the tight fade or the taper cut, but for theological reflection as well. And I love these words of Jaber's. I love how he talks about Jesus when he says, I have read the Gospels over the years, and the belief has grown in me that Christ did not come to found an organized religion, but came instead to found an unorganized one. He seems to have come to carry religion out of the temples into the fields and sheep pastures, onto the roadsides and the banks of rivers, into the houses of sinners and publicans, into the town and the wilderness, toward the membership of all that is here. Toward the membership of all that is here. Jesus followed. I'm going to ask you a question. Is the bigger problem today a world that's forgetting how to come to church? Or is it a church that's forgetting how to go into the world? Because we spend a lot of time wringing our hands trying to figure out how to get people to follow us inside our churches so they can learn to love Jesus, when it seems Jesus spent most of his time out there following other people so they could learn to love one another. And the church, through the centuries, and especially in recent history, It's made mistakes. Undeniably, it has made mistakes. It's almost fashionable to talk about now. The church has hurt people. It's been selfish. It's lost focus. It's mistreated, denied, rejected. It has consumed. The church has taken. Which is why I can't help but see something of the church in the figure of the tax collector in Caravaggio's painting. Partially hidden by the dark, slumped over, worn out, not even looking at Jesus. Some might even say hopeless, a lost cause. And still, Jesus' hand reaches towards us out of the shadows. And the scoffers stand around and say, "Really? Really? You're calling that to follow you? The church? Really?" And called we are. I wonder what shape that calling could take. So many of you do so much out there. It's incredible. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of our beloved community ministry. I'm thinking of Imagination Library. I'm thinking of Margie Netherton's work with NAMI. I'm thinking of our volunteers who go to the place every week. I'm thinking of our deacons. I'm thinking of so much good work that happens week in, week out there. But I'm talking about something else. What I'm wondering about is what it might look for all of us to go together. I'm wondering what it might look like for us to take, for example, what we've been experiencing the past 2 summers and what we're about to experience this Wednesday night with our trucking events, the joy that we've experienced together here, the celebration, the welcome, the generosity, the fun, the delight, the hospitality, all of those things that we get to experience here. I'm wondering something. I'm wondering if we could do that to another set of streets, in another neighborhood. I'm wondering if we could do that. Not because we got it all together, not because we're so great, not because we have the answers, but because we're called. Not to just follow Jesus, but even more to follow like Jesus. To follow people into the blessed, beautiful, awful mess of their lives, to follow them toward the membership of all that is here. It's just a meandering thought. Right now, it's just the beginning of a wandering idea. But it might be worth following. Amen.